The following slide has a number of examples of companies that have very active patent filing programs. You can find these companies publicly traded, privately funded, so patents are a big part of their innovation. I'd like to start by the end of the presentation by summarizing some of the don'ts in terms of your innovation and the role that patents will play. I know it's tough for academics and researchers, but a fundamental rule is don't publish until your invention is protected. And that means confidentiality agreements. It means getting a patent application on file. If you disclose, you have lost your patent rights in most countries of the world. Point 2, don't assume that you own everything. If you've collaborated with other researchers at your university, if you've collaborated with a prof, a doctor, some other persons to give you ideas about how to commercialize your invention, they may have ownership rights. So clarify up front who owns what, so that later when you go to investors and ask them to contribute money, this question has been nailed down and there are no other issues regarding ownership of the invention. Business plan. Make sure you have one. Make sure you stick to it. Make sure you make hard decisions about your patent program. So often we see patent portfolios that are huge and whose costs are totally out of control because the persons who are in charge of it are fearful of making a decision to abandon. So make some hard decisions, proceed with rigor and strategy, including having a budget. So whatever your budget is to draft and file, stick to it. Make sure your lawyers and patent agents stick to it, and that is helpful to get success. There are a few other options apart from patents. We talked a little bit about copyright this morning in terms of artists who are creating music. In the patent world and inventions, there's also trade secrets. There are domain names, logos, trademark rights, social media. So those are other types of intellectual property protection. But in the area in which most of the persons in this audience are working, innovation, engineering, medicine, patents are 99% of the IP that you're going to be dealing with. So ultimately, we hope that the yellow brick road is the result rather than the patent jungle. And thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions either now or at the break.
Thank you very much, Eileen, for making such a complex area easy to understand for most of us who are not lawyers. Any questions for yes, Doug?
Just one question about the handling of patents, and I guess maybe particularly in the U.S., but I don't know how broadly it's affected. But I have the impression that in the early 90s, the U.S. Patent Office stopped examining whether patents were new and whether there was any previous knowledge or not, and sort of said, well, we get so many thousands of these that go nowhere and it wastes all our time and money. We'll let the courts decide. And is that true? And secondly, I know of parties that have been involved in disputes over those kind of patents where the courts settle, and the courts don't always settle on previous knowledge or all the rules that you talked about. Is it true that they've been somewhat eroded, I suppose?
Thank you. So your first question regarding the U.S. Patent Office, you're right, particularly in the technology field, many lawyers and patent agents in the U.S. felt that the U.S. office was issuing patents too easily. So for example, the one-click, there's a patent in the U.S. on the one-click solution to get to a website. So rather than having to click twice or 3 times, a company said, we've come up with the innovation that if you click once to get to the website, we own the patent on that, and anyone has to pay a royalty to us if they use a one-click system. That's one example. There was another patent issued for a ticketing system where if someone was on an airplane and they wanted to go to the bathroom, there'd be a ticket issued so you're next in line. And so that every airline that had some type of system to see if there was a green light, red light on the bathroom had to pay a royalty to a patent. So definitely there was a lot of patent practitioners to say, what's going on with the US office? We're not having that rigorous examination. And even in the biotechnology field, when it first came into its own in the 1980s and early 90s, the Amgens, genetic institutes, there was a sense that the patent office was granting these broad patents. So any type of erythropoietin, for example, that was made, a patent had to be, or a royalty had to be paid to Amgen. And there was controversy, should that minor change of the EPO result in a royalty for all time being paid to a company? That's turned around a little bit. There's been a lot more scrutiny of the U.S. Patent Office since then. But you're right, in terms of the litigation, many of those poorly drafted patents then went to U.S. courts. And the wrinkle with U.S. patents is that the trial is not a judge alone, typically. It's a jury. So a jury sits and hears all the technology about erythropoietin or about your robot, and these are average persons that have not gone to engineering school or medical school or PhDs in biotech, and they're ruling on whether there's an invention or not. And so a lot of decisions went sideways, and even today, with U.S. patent litigation starting at $25 million a pop, that's just to talk to the lawyers in Washington or New York. Even then, most clients want to avoid patent litigation because your lawyers may tell you you've got a great case in the United States, it's still the flip of a coin, because most times it's a jury trial. Yes?
Eileen, the founding partners of Research in Motion are going to be written up in Canadian history as 2 of the worst disasters and perhaps a great pair of bozos. I read recently, within the last week, that essentially their share price is the value of their patents and the cash they have on the balance sheet. So my question is, how do you put a value? I mean, the market is putting a value on what they think it's worth, but what is the real, I'm not asking you about Research in Motion specifically, but just how do you in general put a value on a patent?
Well, many accounting firms make a lot of money over that exact question. And if you went to Ernst & Young versus KPMG versus Deloitte, they will come to you and they'll say, yes, we'd be happy to put a value on your patent portfolio. The difficulty is that the valuation of the IP really depends on what a person would be willing to pay. And so when the Nortel patents were up for sale, and the RIM patents, if they're eventually up for sale, the question will be, how much is Apple or some other company willing to pay and to bargain alongside another company to pay for those patents? And so similarly in today's world where we have a startup company and they may say, what is the value of this robot that we have developed? The best way to get a valuation, in my view, is that you line up 3 companies who are willing to either license or buy that invention and that technology. Now, having been in these meetings, 3 of them will put up a completely different number, depending on how much they want that particular portfolio. So in my view, I think the huge value of the RIM assets are indeed the patents. They've had a very active, aggressive patent filing program, and the value of them, it really depends on what another company is willing to pay for them.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Thank you, Dr. Ambari.